Hey everyone, this is Dave, and today I am excited to bring you another Rocket Lab YouTuber who I think it's been a very long time coming having you on the show, ScottO. When I think of you, I think first of all, you do a great job really drilling down into the numbers and having incredibly detailed spreadsheets. And you, I think, track the Electron cadence a lot more closely than I do, and how many launches we are thinking they might get in any given quarter or year. And finally, you're maybe a little bit more of a bearish bull. Is that fair to say compared to me?
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, which is totally fine. And I like having the discussions with people of differing opinions. It can get a little boring if you're just like talking to someone like, yeah, I agree with that, I agree with you. So yeah, so welcome to the channel, Scott.
Cool, thanks for having me.
Oh, and by the way, I will have his channel link down in the description below if you guys are interested. So today we will be talking about all things Electron following the earnings call, as well as the recent interviews Rocket Lab management did. There's a lot of interesting changes going on with Electron. Seems like a lot of back and forth, and it's been a little bit confusing, to be honest. How do you feel about the Electron manifest this year?
I mean, I don't know what to think about it, because leading in, I was almost under the expectation that they were going to announce an expansion to the manifest. And the reason for that is there was this recent, I think it was New Zealand Business Journal or New Zealand Herald. I don't remember the name of the outlet, but the one gentleman from Rocket Lab mentioned, yeah, we're still going to have X launches this year, but then he went on to say 3 or 4 haste launches. Now, if we go back to the Q3, the manifest that Rocket Lab originally released, there was only 2 haste launches on there. So I'm like, okay, well, it sounds like we might actually have 1 or 2. Like I was assuming 2 new haste contracts, and maybe both this year, but the second one was maybe a 2025 thing. So for them to kind of almost dial that back, it's now looking more maybe closer to 18 and or maybe 20, I guess. That's kind of what I'm ballparking. After that earnings call, I'm a little bit unclear with the haste launches, with the recovery attempts, and also with the overall expectation for Electron for this year now.
Yeah, it's been a very confusing year. I remember at the start of the year, I was like, okay, for sure we'll get a reuse booster. And then later on, it seemed like definitely not. And then now it seems like maybe it's on the table again. Although even in my interview with Peter, he kind of said they're deprioritizing that a little bit because they want all their resources on Neutron, which I guess is fair enough because, you know, like 50 million per launch versus 8, maybe 7. So, but yeah, a lot of question marks. Okay. So, first off, I just wanted to ask you, you kind of touched on it, how many launches you're now thinking for the remainder of the year?
Well, I'm assuming that given the recency of that article, I think we do have those 3 haste launches. Now, as far as what those are, I'm assuming that because there was no new announcement, maybe that means that one of those Lidos launches that were in 2025, maybe that got kind of brought like closer to us now. I don't know.
Forward.
But yeah, 18 to 20 overall is my expectation, with 3 of those being the haste missions, and ideally 3 in total recoveries, so 2 more upcoming for the second half of the year.
Oh, you do think there'll be 3 recoveries? So a while back, Adam said maybe 1 more recovery, I thought.
Yeah, it's wishful thinking, and my rationale with that is we've already had the 4 of a kind mission January 31st. I'm hoping that we get maybe in Q3 we get the 9 Archimedes reuse mission, although that wasn't mentioned on the call.
Yeah.
But it also seemed like, especially with the Neutron being pushed out, that hopefully they're trying to squeeze in that booster reuse for maybe Q4.
I hope so. They haven't really talked much about the engine reuse, Rutherford reuse lately. You still confident that needs to happen before they reuse a full booster?
I don't know. Like, it would be nice to see, but I don't know if it's really needed. Like, I'm assuming that after that one reuse mission that we had, where there was the single reuse Rutherford, I'm assuming that things went well for that one, maybe to the point where it is just like, you know what, forget the 9 recovery reuse. And I think that's maybe why it wasn't mentioned on the call. They're just going to kind of bring it all together and launch it all at once.
Yeah. Okay. So I did want to share these charts you make. If anyone doesn't follow ScottO on Twitter or Discord, he often releases updated charts showing the expected manifest of Rocket Lab for the rest of the year using the publicly available information we have. So let me see if I can bring that up. We should be looking at right now the updated manifest that you're thinking of for the remainder of 2024. Can you maybe walk us through a little bit of how you see this playing out?
Yep. So we got the 4 locked in for Q4, of course, and for Q2, they've guided for 4, maybe 5 launches. That's why we've got that one Electron kind of straddling Q2 and Q3.
Mhm.
We know that, well, we assume that there's the 3 haste launches, so I've kind of staggered those throughout the second half of the year. And then optimistically, I've put in those 2 the 2 recovery missions, as you can see, in the start of Q3 and the end of Q4.
Okay. And here's a question for you. Do you think we'll potentially see more reusable boosters not recovered? Like we had one already this year that was expended. And does that bother you if so?
Um, I mean, like, I don't know if I'd say it bothers me, but it is like, I don't know. It was always so cool. Like you see the rocket go up, and it's like, oh, it's got red on it. You know what that means? And now it's just kind of like, yeah, it used to, and especially like you kind of mentioned up top, like I'm a bit of a bearish bull. Um, these electron recovery missions have been um, promised, for lack of a better term, since like 2019 now, and it just
Yeah.
seems like, for the duration I've been tracking Rocket Lab for like a couple, maybe few years now, it just seems like I keep pushing the recovery efforts further and further to the right. And yeah, by now it's kind of like, I understand things happen, but it's like we were doing the air recoveries and now we changed the plans and we're going to reuse a booster this year, but now we're not. And now maybe we are again. I don't know. But it is a little bit like, I don't know. It'd be cool if they're just doing the recoveries. I'm really looking forward to that. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And I understand like the whole, we need to focus on the neutron, but I'm also at the same time like, well, then let's shut down space systems, right? Because if we all have to put our eggs in one basket, right? I
Right.
mean, like hire a few more guys if you need to. I just don't quite I don't know if I quite buy that whole we can't focus on the electron recovery. Like, come on, you can.
Y- Yeah, I mean, I guess, they could hire more people and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It does seem like, space systems is pretty solid, pretty solid in terms of profitability,
Mhm,
whereas
mhm.
Electron, it's kind of on the edge right now. Would you agree with that?
Previously, yeah. I think this past quarter, what were we at? I think we were like 20 plus percent margins for the electron itself, for the launch side of the business.
Was it that high? Okay, I haven't gone into any detail in the quarterly numbers yet. But
Yeah, like 26% actually for the launch margins for this quarter. And like the quarter before, not so good. It was negative 24, but we did have that anomaly. And then
yeah,
going back 2 more quarters, we have 27% and 22%. So it's their margins are getting there. I think the big drag right now is the OpEx.
right. And I'm sure usability would help for that as well. You would think,
Hmm.
or at least it's been promised to. So.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely will.
So Peter Beck, that is, did mention in his recent interviews that a lot of the payment from the customer actually comes in before the rockets launch, 90%. And, if these launches get delayed, yes, they're not recognizing the revenue that quarter, but it's still technically in their bank account and being paid, and it will get recognized whenever that launch eventually happens. So my question is, like, how much should we care about the cadence or the launches being pushed out if it's in a Rocket Lab bank account somewhere that's just not recognized?
It's like, to me, it's not a big deal, especially like I mean, even if we do go from what was expected 22 to maybe 24 launches, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, like even if we still end up, what, 18 launches, like 80%
Mhm.
growth, I'll take it, Like
Yeah.
it's space systems is growing like like crazy, launch is growing like crazy. I mean, it's and it's not like they're disappearing too, right? And it makes an easier comparison for 2025, because again, if we have 22 launches this year and then 22 launches next, it's going to look like stagnant growth. But if we still have that 80% growth this year and then a bunch gets pushed into next year, I mean, it still just makes the comparable look even better. So I'd rather them, I don't mind too much. It's going up into the right overall. And that's what I think really matters long term.
Okay. So if we ended up with, say, 16 launches this year as opposed to 18 or 20, you'd be okay with that one? Or
as long as I knew that the recovery efforts were still coming down the pipeline, I think I'd feel better. But like, yeah, even I'd say 15, anything less than 15, and I'm starting to be concerned. Yeah.
Okay. On the recovery efforts, I think you had a presentation to share it with us where you went into a bit more depth on that. Would you like to? I'll see if I can go ahead and add that.
So I guess we'll start kind of top level here. So I'm going to more or less just explain the entire valuation model. This is all available on Patreon to view and download if you're interested. And I'll just kind of give a quick rundown of where everything is coming from so that everything is straightforward. So disclaimer, the episode is about to get very numbers heavy. And Dave, if you have any questions or comments as we go along, feel free to stop me. All right.
Yeah. I can see we were already getting into fuel numbers. I guess that's for boats.
Yeah.
So we're going to get pretty in depth here.
Yeah. So I'll just zoom all the way out.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
See, this, guys, is what I was saying when I said he goes very in depth into the numbers in spreadsheets.
So we'll start. I'll just kind of explain. The easy way to think of this is there are three distinct parts. There is basically what is reported per quarter. Like when you think of like a typical earnings release, this is what is all input. So each column is going to be the respective quarter.
Okay.
So all of this is the financial data. And essentially what happens is everything from that section is taken and fed kind of down below. This is like a key performance indicator and calculator section is an easy way to think of it. So it's all of the stuff that you would not necessarily find in an SEC file document, but is still stuff worth tracking. So think like number of solar modules that are made, the price of the reaction wheels, number of Electron launches, virtually everything quantifiable that you can think of is probably here in this model. So like I was saying, all of the financial stuff, it gets fed to this section part of the second section. And what it's doing here, it is basically doing math in the background to get an idea of the relationship of numbers. What I mean by that is, like, for example, the amount that they have to pay on debt, you can find a good relationship between the amount of debt that they have and the amount that they have to pay for, like, to service that debt. Now, what you can do with that is you can take all of that information and you can kind of start to populate the forward values with that. So as an example, Rocket Lab often mentions that the R&D and the SG&A are as a percentage of revenue. So if you have an idea of what the revenue is going to look like going forward, you can have a rough idea of what the R&D spend going forward is going to look like as well. Mm-hmm. So to kind of really oversimplify everything, it is historic data that is run through a kind of calculator and generates forward values. And ultimately what we can do is we can arrive at a price target for Rocket Lab for the far future. In this case, the valuation model goes all the way up to 2030 and has price targets, I should say. Disclaimer, not financial advice, but it has price targets that go all the way up to 2030. So to kind of zoom it in a little bit closer now, there is this section up above. The purple, green, and the gray sections, these combined are just essentially the three different parts of the business that Rocket Lab is broken up into. Okay. So the purple is going to be the launch, the green is going to be the space systems, and then finally we put those together. The dark gray is the combined values of those. I guess we can also scroll down to the second section here. The red section, this is for the Electron. And this kind of quantifies everything from, the number of launches to the number of builds per year. What else do we have? The cost to build, and ultimately what we're going to go over today is the cost to recover. Now, I'm not going to show too much of that because that's why you're here. So now we're going to hop into the second tab, being the recovery tab, and I am going to pitch why Rocket Lab should buy their own recovery vessel.
Ah, interesting.
So is everything so far so good?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
clearly dense. Like I'm not
Yes.
going to say I
Yeah. I
read
warned you
through all
guys.
those numbers, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. So first things first, the vessel that Rocket Lab operates, or rents, I should say, is the DP-1 Seaworker. So you kind of see a little glimpse of the photo there. It's
Mhm.
more or less like that, but it's got a big crane off the side and it picks the Electron out of the ocean. I've kind of highlighted a few key components of what matters for the vehicle. We should say is there's 20, like a capacity for 23 people to be on board. We don't need that full capacity, but it's worth mentioning. We know that we know what the engine type is and whatnot, and a few other variables that we can kind of bring forward into the second section here. So all of this information, everything that you see, it can all be manipulated. So these dark gray cells, every single one of those is basically part of a formula. So for example, if $75,000 per day seems way too high, you can say it's $80 per day. Well, that's going to ultimately affect everything that trickles down past that.
Right.
So I guess we'll kind of just go line by line, and I'll kind of explain my reasoning. And yeah, Dave, if you think something's too high or too low, feel free to jump in and let me know what kind of adjustments I should be making.
Sure.
So
I don't
first thing,
necessarily know the right cost of a boat rental, but
I know,
yeah.
and that's the thing too, is like I'm hoping that even if this video, even if I'm wrong in some aspects, I'm hoping that somebody in the comments is going to reach out and be like, hey, just so you know, this is too high, this is too low. I'm constantly updating the model, and that's kind of the exact reason why, is because I want to be overall like directionally accurate. I know it's not going to be perfect. I might be way out to lunch, but I've put a lot of time and research into this, and yeah, ultimately I'm not an expert, but I'm yeah trying to
Seems like you're well on your
basically
way.
yeah, working on it. I'll get there. All right. So first things first, you got to rent the boat. Based on previous interviews with Peter Beck, the ship should be roughly $75,000, and this is just to sit in the port. So this is just for the rental. Past that, I'm estimating that you need approximately 3 days to do the full recovery. That includes maybe some downtime that you're sitting in the port,
Mhm.
kind of getting everyone together, kind of assembling everything and whatnot. So if we take just simply the $75,000 per day, multiply that by the 3 days, you're looking already at around $225,000 for the recovery effort. Now, of course, you need to factor in labor and fuel. So what we're going to start with is the head count. Based on previous recovery missions, what I've been able to see is no more than 5 people at any one given time. Now, previously I had the head count was at like 10 or 12, I don't recall. But the more that I'm watching the recoveries, it seems like there's maybe 6, maybe 7 people on board. So we have it at 8 just to kind of have a little bit more of a margin of safety built in.
Sure. Yeah.
Past that, and I realize this is a bit of a clumsy metric as far as like what exactly they're being paid, because I'm sure you're not paying their actual salary, but we can estimate that they're being paid well, right?
Sure.
So 8 people being paid, $100,000 per year salary. This arrives at $800,000 in total, divided by the 365 for the number of days that you're having to reduce that annual salary into a day. I hope that made sense. But
Yeah.
ultimately, you're looking at the just north of $2,000 per wages per day, and then you're multiplying that by the 3 days that we mentioned earlier, arriving us at.
Probably, sorry to
Oh,
interrupt, probably
yeah,
not
go ahead.
too material, but I do wonder if you get paid some kind of a premium for having to, stay overnight on the boat and stuff like that. But
Exactly. Yeah. So like maybe this is too low. Like maybe that's one that jump in like people in the comments if you know better, if this is numbers way off, like
yeah,
please reach out. I want to.
ultimately though, 6,000 to 12,000, like I guess it's not the biggest deal when it comes to a rocket that's going for 8 million, but
Exactly. Yeah. And like if you look at the 6.5 million or 6.5 thousand, even if you like double that, like you said, it's like we're still roughly in the same range, 250 to 260, right? Like
sure,
not a huge impact, but got to pay him something. So 6.5 to 10,000, we can call it.
sure.
And then past this, we need to account for the fuel. So this is let's just see. Right. So this is just detailing the engine type. So the consumption rate is 168 liters per hour, and it travels generally at 10 knots, which is, you convert that into kilometers per hour because we're in Canada. 18.52 kilometers per hour is roughly what you're looking at for that. Now, the distance out to recover the electron, this is roughly 600. Now, if you want to pause here, you can kind of see where I'm deriving that math from. This number is conservative on the high side. Like, for example, the most recent mission that we had is 580 kilometers to the splashdown site. And then it took them 18 minutes. And to make a long story short, an extra 5 kilometers. So we're looking at 585 kilometers. Let's just round that up to 600 kilometers total. That arrives us using let me just double check here before I say anything. Yeah, so that arrives us at 65 hours roughly for the full recovery. Now, this is where that 3 days came in from earlier, because we're going to give ourselves that buffer and assume that, we're actually hiring the workers for 72 hours. So giving them, a bit of extra time to unpack and to load and unload, right?
Sure.
So you take the number of hours and the number of fuel consumption, and that ultimately arrives us at 11,000 liters of fuel needed. Of course, you multiply that by the price. Now this is a good example of like speaking outside of my expertise. This is what I was able to find is like the rough average price of diesel, comparing that to the current price of diesel, but then you also need to like a 25% increase to account for additives and stabilizers. So roughly that is what I assume the price to be for the fuel itself. It's about $1.50 per liter. So ultimately that arrives us at just north of $16,000, and using the rent, the labor, and the fuel consumption, we can arrive at roughly $250,000 per recovery.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions so far?
No, makes sense to me. Obviously, we still have to think about, refurbishment or whatever else and getting it back through the production line. But in terms of getting it back, then yeah, that seems like the right ballpark.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I think we'll just go line by line. I'll kind of tease it out here, but we then like kind of exactly what you're saying, Dave, to kind of factor in that refurbishment cost. So we know, actually, I'll hop over here quick. We know based on the history of the cost for Electron to build, where is this? Yeah, so we are roughly, just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. 6, that looks too high. Oh, no. Okay, this is the line. Yep, so right here, we have the amortized cost per launch for the Electron.
Okay.
So the most recent quarter that we have, by simply taking the cost of goods sold for the launch side of the business, dividing that by the number of launches in the quarter, you can see that we're roughly at $6 million for each Electron built. Now, we had that anomaly I guess that was in Q3, but that would kind of, I think, heavily weigh into Q4. And I think some of that is also being felt a little bit in Q1. Because you can see previously, we were at just right around $8 million to build each Electron. It was going down 7.5, 7, under 6, and it was almost 5 million here. And then we had
that was looking good.
Yeah. And then using the forward guidance, and this is where it's a bit of an educated assumption here, but we're looking around $5.25 million per Electron build going forward. And that number was found by taking the gross margin, which is guided to be, I should say, 24 to 26%, offset by a less favorable mix within space systems. So the less favorable mix within space systems, that tells us that space systems will probably be on the lower end of that. We'll call it 25 mid-range. And that would mean that the launch is going to be a little bit higher. So roughly 26% margins is what we can expect for that. And then just kind of scrolling back down to kind of reiterate, that number is found by multiplying the number of launches in the quarter by the expected cost of the launches for the quarter. So ultimately, right around the $5 million mark again for the Electron cost.
Okay.
So we're going to hop back over and make a Not so conservative assumption for a change. We're just going to assume the cost of build is $5 million. And the reason that we're going to go with that and not go with the 5.25 or something even a little bit higher to be conservative or to have that margin of safety is because by the time that the recovery program is in full effect is ideally 2025. So I'm assuming over the next few quarters, as more and more electrons are being built in those factories, the average cost is going to go down. So I think that 5 million is a safe assumption to make.
It's a quick question that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you there still, Dave?
Oh, yeah, I lost you for a second.
Oh, I hear you again. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, my quick question was whether the amortized cost for launch there includes like launch infrastructure and that kind of stuff, or are we just talking about the rocket?
That would include everything. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
full deal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So we have the cost to build the Electron. We're going to assume $5 million per Electron from 2025 going forward. The bill of materials is split evenly 3 ways, and we know this because there was a recent quote on February 14th by Adam Spice, and he mentioned pretty much, well, he mentioned explicitly, the bill of materials makes up 1/3 of the cost of the Electron. Direct and indirect manufacturing and labor makes up another third, and 1/3 is overhead, being launch, fuels, and etc. So those simply, it's just taking the $5 million and factoring in the 1/3 of that. So each, it's being split 3 ways is an easy way to say it. So past that, each recovery of the first stage is 60% of the recovered value. And we know this from past interviews. It was mentioned at one point to be a little bit higher, but we're going to kind of go with the conservative average here. As you can see here, there's a few different references of where this was mentioned to be 60%.
Okay.
So 60% of the original 5 million, that's landing us at $3 million of recovered value per recovery.
Sure.
Now, this is one that maybe you want to chime in on, Dave, because essentially what we're doing here is this number is, okay, the easy way to explain this is, and I know this is very wrong, but just bear with me, but if the original Electron takes 10 hours to make, what percentage of that 10 hours does it take to refurbish the original? So in this case, the 25%, I'm assuming that it's the refurbishment is 25% of the effort of the initial build effort. Does that make sense?
I mean, it very well could be. I don't know if I have any like data on that. So,
And I don't think there is any. This is kind of a guess, right? And that's
yeah,
kind of the beauty of like being able to have the spreadsheet for yourself is like,
right.
you can change any of these variables and see if it still makes sense. But
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're going to go with for now, is assuming that for every 1 hour that it took to build the original, it only takes about 15 minutes to refurbish the recovery.
Sounds fair enough.
Cool. And then the cost to recover, that is a number just simply being fed from the previous table, including the rent, labor, and fuel.
Okay.
So the second stage, the cost to build, we know that by just simply subtracting the recovered value from the overall Electron. So essentially what it's doing here is it's taking the part that needs to rebuild and considering that against the cost of the original build. So in this case, 40%. And then for the total cost to reuse, it is simply taking the refurbishment effort plus the cost to recover plus the cost to build the second stage back up again.
Okay. So call it 3.5 basically.
Yep. 3.5 million for reuse is what I'm arriving to.
Okay. Versus like a 5 for one-off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what we're going to do for this next section is compare just what they're doing now, basically, to if they were to be doing this recovery effort kind of full swing. So for here,
Can I just cut in with one question?
Yeah.
Because I'm not recalling this, whether it's ever been mentioned. Have they talked about reusing these boosters multiple times?
I don't have an exact quote, but like the quick answer is yes. But like on the other hand, too, it kind of doesn't necessarily matter for this example overall. There's two different paths that we're going to take, and like the kind of zoomed out, like overall, what I'm trying to say is basically it doesn't matter. We're going to assume that they're only launching twice. But the
Okay.
current example that we're on, we're just gonna take a glimpse into what if they were able to reuse 5.
Okay.
So for this one, this is just a standard Electron. It is $8.1 million in revenue for each launch. So it's simply put, it is just taking the $8.1 million, it's taking this cell here, the initial
Mhm.
value, multiplying it by the number of electrons. So all this to say, if you were to have 5 Electron launches, this is the revenue that you're going to land at. The lifetime cost for that first launch, this is going to be that $5 million initially, right?
Hmm.
And then
Okay.
for one reuse, and sorry, I kind of misspoke originally. This is not going to be for this is just for any 5 electrons to launch. This isn't
Right.
exclusive for the recoveries. It
Yeah.
doesn't yeah, it doesn't matter how many times you're launching it. Any 5 electrons is going to garner that much revenue. So $40.5 million for 5 electron launches is the takeaway from that line.
Mhm.
So the first, like to build the first electron and launch it, you're looking at that $5 million that from up here. And if you're looking to launch that a second time, you're going to take the $5 million and then you're going to also take the cost to reuse. So for the first 2 launches, you're looking at $8.5 million cost in total. And then you understand what's going on forward. So
Yeah.
it's going to take that first one and then use 2 of those recovered launches,
Mhm.
3 recovered launches for the fourth, and then 4 recovered launches for this one. So the lifetime cost of 5 launches, if that one electron is recovered or launched 5 times in total,
Yeah.
you're looking right around $19 million.
So significantly better margin.
Yeah, yeah, and if you amortize that, so basically just taking the running cost and dividing it by the number of launches, you can see already that it's close to $3.8 million, we'll call that for 5 per 5, right? Compared
Mhm.
to if it was just the standard electrons, you're looking, well, right at 5, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the profit per launch, we do the same thing. We're just simply taking the revenue and subtracting the cost, arriving at the profit per launch. And you can see that the profit per launch goes up an healthy amount, right?
Mhm.
And then ultimately we can land at margins, which the original, the first launch, that basically where we're starting 2025 in, we're looking at 38% for each launch, but that could be as high as 53%, or to have a little visual with that, it's, goes up a meaningful amount um, if you are planning to launch it more than a couple times.
Yeah.
Um, so that is it for the reuse section. If we were to continue renting, does that everything good so far?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it pretty thorough look at it.
Cool. And now we're going to get into why Rocket Lab should buy their own vessel. And maybe who knows? Maybe this is what they're waiting on. Is
I
like
don't know. From what I hear, Peter Beck doesn't love owning those marine
I
assets.
know. Wishful thinking. Maybe this is their next acquisition.
Yeah, could be.
So we're going to assume, and this is I've looked up like I don't know 20 or 30 different boats, all of the same capacity and uh, capability as the DP1C worker. You're looking around $5 million for just to buy the vessel outright.
Okay.
Past that, we're going to assume 25 launches annual. I think this is a safe assumption to make for 2025. And then recovery mix is 50%. So this is kind of what I was saying a moment ago. Like it's cool if we can launch the same electron 5 times, but also if we're just launching them twice, this is basically the next setup that we're looking at. Is a recovery mix of 50%. So each electron could just be reused once for the set of numbers that we're going to get into now. Um, Actually, I'm going to hide this just for a second. So for these numbers here are all annualized. So, and again, this is one of those things. Please let me know in the comments if I'm up to lunch. If this doesn't make sense, please let me know. I think a lot of these are redundant as well. Like for example, um, the regulatory compliance. I think this would also actually include like insurance and whatnot twice. I think that the docking and the port fees, those could probably be combined. But as always with these models, I'd be conservative, especially in this situation where I'm a little less familiar.
Okay.
Ultimately, though, what we're looking at is $150,000 per year for docking, 100 for insurance, $200,000 for maintenance. And you can kind of see there's little cells. Hopefully you guys can see that. If you're unclear about where I'm getting the numbers from, there's usually a little note attached to it. Yeah, $200,000 for maintenance, $20,000 for port fees, 50,000 for regulatory compliance, for the upkeep total per year to be, we'll call it $500,000. Past that, we do need the fuel and the labor. These numbers are just being brought down from above, multiplied by the number of recoveries for the year.
Okay.
So with that, we have now the operation total as well as the upkeep total for a net recovery value of $806,000. Now keep in mind, this is for the whole year. So if we amortize that amongst the each recovery, you're looking around $65,000 for each recovery.
Right.
So to kind of tie everything all together, we'll do a comparison of renting, what they're currently doing, versus owning. So for years 1 through 5, you can see the renting is just going to stay stagnant. $3 million per year is what we can expect currently, with the cumulative total being 15.5 over the set of 5 years. Now for owning, it starts at 5.8, and this one is of course going to be a lot higher because of the initial purchase, but then it is going to work itself off. And kind of to explain everything with a graph, the cost comparison between renting and owning pays
Yeah.
itself off basically in a 2-year period.
Hmm.
So this, and again, I could be missing a couple variables, but it seems almost like a no-brainer. If Rocket Lab is going to take this recovery stuff seriously, probably a good time to buy a vessel.
Yeah. I mean, the math seems to make sense to me. I wonder if they're maybe just waiting to make sure, everything pans out okay. And
Mhm,
like, I guess they kind of shifted focus away from recovery. And then, so maybe that played into it a little bit. But
mhm.
yeah, it sounds like you make a good argument for it anyway.
Cool.
So anything else you wanted to share presentation wise or?
No, that's it for the recovery stuff. I've been working on that past few days, just kind of making sure the numbers are all put together and researched. And that's what I came up with, is a 2-year payback period for Rocket Lab to buy a vessel if they are serious about the recovery effort.
Right. Yeah. So that makes sense to me. What it seemed clear, regardless of if they buy the vessel or not, though, is you're looking at a quite significant margin improvement once you get recovery under your belt. So seems like it's definitely worth doing. It's something I've been waiting on for a long time.
Mhm.
Basically since I started following the company, I was really looking forward to it. So still remember the days of trying to catch them with the helicopter.
Yeah. How did you feel when they pivoted? Were you upset, or were you kind of like giving the benefit of the doubt? How did you feel?
Um, I was so first of all, I just thought it was going to look super cool to see the catch, and we
Yeah.
didn't get that, unfortunately. I remember doing a live stream, and then it just didn't happen, and it was a whole lot of nothing. But beyond that, I just felt like it was going to delay the recovery, which I think it probably has. It's safe to say, like they had to do some additional waterproofing. It's taken longer to shift to this new method. Um,
Mhm.
I'm not an expert on how safe it was for the pilot. I know a lot of people were concerned that it was unsafe for the helicopter pilot, but to me, I think that kind of thing has been done before. So I don't know.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think, best case scenario for me would have been the catch works reliably, less waterproofing, probably a little less refurbishment, although it sounds like they handle the water very well. And they would probably be going with recovered boosters by now, you would hope, if they had got that catch going.
Mhm.
But I think, this is still a good option. Did you have any other thoughts you wanted to say about that model?
Um, Nothing comes to mind. No, I think I've probably over-explained, if anything.
No, no, no. I think it was good. It went into depth, really showed why recovery and reusability is so important even for Electron. I know there's a lot of questions when it comes to a rocket that small, how much sense it really makes
Hmm.
when you're talking about boats and all that kind of stuff, but you really went into all that, which is great. Um, Curious, maybe now I'll take a bear side and I'll ask you. We've seen a ton of companies start with a small rocket and ultimately cancel it. And we've even seen Peter Beck say that, their time is better used on Neutron in terms of shift versus trying to get recovery going. Uh, would you be like devastated if they just decided forget Electron, forget all this, or how do you think that would affect things?
It like I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it would take for that to happen. Like, I think the only way that that would happen is if we do see kind of less than 25 launches, we'll call it.
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of people are under the assumption like, oh, as soon as Neutron's here, it's going to cannibalize Electron. And I,
Yeah,
I'm kind of like half and half in that camp. I think that there's so much responsive space that's going to be needed going forward that you will still need a small launcher. And if it's not Rocket Lab, it's got to be somebody. And if it's
yeah,
going to be Rocket Lab, like, yeah, let's make it more cost effective. But after what it's been 5 years now, and still waiting on it, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if they canceled it, but I don't think it makes sense to cancel it.
yeah. Personally, I don't either. I was just kind of playing devil's advocate there. I
Yeah,
was
fair. I love it.
curious what you thought. I mean, it has taken a very long time to get the cadence to the level where it can be profitable. It's been quite a slog,
Mhm.
so
Definitely, yeah.
it would feel pretty sad to cancel at this point, but at the same time, you hope to hit profitability sooner than I think Electron ultimately did.
For sure.
Okay, and before we go, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the recent Q1 results. I have to admit, I've been super busy lately, and I did watch the presentation and have some initial thoughts, but I haven't really updated my numbers or anything like that. So I was wondering how you felt about it.
Um, Better than the overall market, apparently.
Yeah, yeah, I was a
Like
little
the
surprised by
same
that.
thing. You hold Tesla as well. Like
I
it
do.
seemed like Rocket Lab and Tesla both kind of had like not so hot earnings, but the market's like, I don't care, I'm buying. So I'm surprised by the reception. Like I was I was completely in the camp of like if there's a neutron delay, expect it to like maybe all-time lows. And we got that, and we got um a reduced electron manifest. And
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get through the numbers like you said, but it almost seems well, oh man, maybe we should talk about the reaction wheels too, because what I was going to say is like it seems based on the backlog projections and like the guidance that we do have, it seems like space systems revenue might stagnate for the year. It might kind of just be what we reach in Q2 and kind of that's it. I mean, not just the
But
overall revenue actually.
yeah, there was such a big step up from Q4 to Q1, though. Is it really the end of the world? Like, if we, what do we had
Yeah,
quarter
like
over
it just
quarter growth of 60
yeah.
something?
Yeah, I know. And like again, if you zoom out, like we're still at like what 50% growth year over year, even with the stagnation.
Yeah,
But it's just that like that that optics that the market would look at it and be like, well, quarter over quarter is, the
right.
company's dying, it's dead, and that could cause some concern. But um yeah, between a neutron delay, a electron manifest reduction, maybe stagnating revenue for the year, or for the second half of the year, I should say. I would not have expected this kind of reaction from the market. But to play devil's advocate with that, you had an interview the other day, and one number, like if there was one takeaway from that, it was 2,000. No, no, he said north of 2,000 reaction wheels this year to
Yeah.
one customer. And I'm like, okay, well, if you look on their website, that specific wheel, the 12 NMS wheel, goes for 100 to 120,000 per wheel,
Hmm.
and you multiply that by north of 2000, where is this? And the reason I say that is if you subtract the MDA recognition for this year, which that's a little bit hazy too, because I'm not quite sure how much of that is going to be recognized this year. But
Yeah.
if you subtract that out, you're kind of left with a lot less than 200,000. I don't think it's even 100,000. I think it's like 100. It's in the range of 100,000. So I'm like, either they're selling these wheels at like half the price for this one customer, or they're just not in the backlog yet, or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, we do know they're volume discounted to some degree, but I guess the question is what degree, which we
Hmm.
didn't really get an answer on. But
Yeah, yeah. Like
yeah,
the Electron bulk buys, those are like 20% discount, but
yeah,
even like a 20% discount, like it Space Systems revenue should be a lot higher. Like the backlog, I mean, in particular, should be a lot higher.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know. It's
That's one of those things I keep coming back to. Like I'd spent a lot of time prepping for the recovery thing here, but I'm
yeah,
like, I keep coming back to backlog. I'm like, what's going on with these reaction wheels? I wish they would have said too how many of those were sold like last year or even in Q1 to kind of give us an idea of like, are they scaling, or was it like evenly split through each quarter, or like where are they at with that?
yeah. Well, I guess we'll just have to see how it goes. I don't
Yeah.
really have an answer for you on that one.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, I mean, overall, I felt like, profitability still heading in the right direction. Obviously, for Q1, we had large top line growth quarter over quarter. So, I was wondering if, I know delays are bad, but I thought maybe just having some certainty around, because I think pretty much nobody believed at that point that Neutron was going to launch. So maybe just having some kind of certainty on the actual timeline helps.
It must have been that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe, just me doing the interviews just pop the
That's it.
stock 4%.
You got to do it more often.
Yeah. Well, they did say maybe they're open to that kind of thing more in the future. So we'll see what
That's cool.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was awesome to see. Like, it's been such a good week because even leading into the Q1 call, and I don't mean to like slight any analysts, but a lot of the time the questions are asked, and like you can just see in the Discord, people are like, oh, come
Yeah.
on, like we know this. But
Yeah.
then just having that like in the back of my mind, like we get like a part two. It's like it was so cool to have. And like, I don't know, it's just been an awesome week for Rocket Lab investors.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I was just going over like sometimes now I'm just like, oh, maybe I should have asked this question instead of that question, but anyway, it's over with.
Gonna
Probably
need a
would have
follow
changed a
up.
few things, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Are there any questions that you were hoping to ask and didn't have time for, or any that you weren't allowed to ask?
No question. They apparently it did happen with Vince where he was going to ask something specific about the reaction wheel and it wasn't allowed. But no, they
Mm.
didn't tell me anything wasn't allowed. But I feel like I had a pretty good sense of what I wouldn't have been able to ask, and I didn't really include it. Um, I probably like I had a long list of questions, and I probably only got through about half of them or something, maybe a little over. So I didn't have a very good sense of how long each question would take, and I had 30 minutes. But yeah, if I could do it over, maybe I'd ask a few more different things, maybe a little less on the neutron, but that technical talk is fun for me as well. So
Yeah, no, you did a great job. It was great to watch because like I'm so numbers heavy, and I feel
mhm.
like you complement the community very well.
Yeah,
Great
thanks.
questions. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay, well, I think Scott, this has been long overdue. I think I may have actually known you longer than Vince, even though I've never had you on the channel. Is that possible? You were on the How long have you been on the Discord server?
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely long overdue. Thank you for coming on. If
Mhm.
anyone is interested in seeing tons of in-depth spreadsheets from Scott, I do have a link to his channel in the description down below. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And to everyone watching, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.